The Magic Item Rarity System in Dungeons and Dragons is dumb. Hot take, there I said it, but it's just always felt weird to me and off to me for three main reasons. And then we're going to talk about all those first of all, and then we're going to get into my homebrew solution for a Magic Item Rarity System that I think just works better. But again, this is just all of this. It's just my opinion. So I do want to hear what you guys think down in the comments if you're going to be making magic items or what your thoughts are on magic. If this is even something I should be homebrewing. And this isn't even a big one. If anything, it makes the game easier because that's one thing with homebrews. A lot of times it gets really complicated. This is me actually taking it a little bit, make it more easy, especially in the spirit of 5th edition. It should be easier and less complicated or as many categories. We'll get into all that. But that's also where homebrews come from me, is when things feel bad, and the rarity system as it is feels bad. The number one reason why this feels bad to me is I feel like it's far more valuable as a dungeon master, because I'm coming from the perspective of a dungeon master right now. It's far more valuable for me to know the power level of an item than it is how rare it is defined. It feels weird for the game to come from a perspective of how rare it is defined and how scarce of a resource it is instead of how powerful it is. I want to know how powerful it is, and then I can choose how scarce it is, because effectively the system's doing both of those things for you. It's telling you how rare it is, and it lists the item off, and the item is however powerful it is. Why not keep the power focused on here's the item and here's how powerful it is? I'm going to label it based off of how powerful it is. And if you can't tell from where my homebrew system's coming from, I label it based off of power. So here's the item, here's how strong it is, and I'm going to label it, put the stamp on it of how powerful it is, and then you as a dungeon master can decide how rare it is, because that feels a lot more intuitive for me to be able to decide where and how often this is possible to find in my world. Because if I have a high magic campaign when magic items are everywhere and all cities have a magic item shop, that's gonna be a lot more different than your world that might be low magic, and casters in general are hunted down and feared. And that connects right into number two, which is I don't want to be told how rare something is. I feel like that's weird. Like I just gave the example of, is our worlds, all of our worlds across all campaigns are different, and the magic items we put in there are different. So the rarity just isn't a very intuitive way to describe how powerful a magic item is. And to combine both those points together, I think for new dungeon masters, I want a user-friendly system of here's how powerful these magic items are, here's the different power levels of magic items, and about what type of power of a magic item fits in that category. And then you can decide to give it to them, which therefore is choosing its rarity of how scarce it is, and really when you choose for that item to exist in your game or not. Then that leads to people starting to put price tags on the different rarities, and different magic items cost different ones. But then if you go through it, and I'm not going to do this in this video because I personally am not as fully fluent with every single magic item. I'm sure other people could point out better what crazy instances of this item's a common item and this one's a very rare or whatever, and it doesn't make sense across the different categories, right? Because that could totally be another problem I could bring up. But I am a homebrew DM and I make up all of my magic items. I take inspiration from magic items for sure, but very rarely, if ever, do I ever take a magic item from a book of some kind. I usually look at it for inspiration and then make my own, which is why for this it always felt weird to me. Is when I was making my own homebrew magic items, I do it all the time, and I get to the spot about what label do I put on it for how rare it is, and that just felt useless and weird. And all of that combined together leads me to my third point of there are too many categories of all these magic items. If you don't know, there are 6 categories of common, uncommon, rare, very rare, legendary, and artifact, which also just saying it off in order like that feels weird, because you go with a rarity system at first with common, uncommon, rare, very rare, then they abandon the whole rarity situation and just say legendary, which is a very classic thing. In my system I used to say legendary. I love that legendary thing, and then artifact, which feels different from the first 4. Just saying. But for myself, coming from a homebrew perspective, or coming from a labeling an item, or a new dungeon master, God forbid, trying to figure out the power level of these items and how strong something is, or let's say I take an item, change it a little bit, well, what does that do to the power? Basically, if I was to homebrew a magic item, show it on screen right now, and have everybody vote on what rarity it would fit under, if you have 6 different categories across the board, there's going to be some room for debate, or a lot of weird gray areas for you to choose. Oh, no, that's rare. Oh, no, I think it's very rare, or what? And there's going to be a lot of categories leading to these overlapping spots, which I think is not useful or helpful towards this, and 6 categories is just too much, especially in my opinion for 5th edition, which should be very simple, streamlined, and easy. Which leads us to what I have done in my own homebrew system that I would love to share your thoughts on. I do it all the time in my DC playbooks every single month. I have magic items and I give my patrons a bunch of magic items with art and a whole bunch of stuff we make every single month. And I use this system and I label it along the system, and it's been very intuitive and I think very helpful. And on top of that, a quick update about Alkander's Almanac of all things, the Kickstarter book that I launched. One of those things in the book, it's not in the actual book of Alkander's Almanac because I'm focusing that book on the rules of the game and the core of the game, but I wanted to have some add-on bonuses to give for subclasses, monsters, and magic items. So this magic item booster pack with 100 magic items in one PDF. They are all 100 super awesome magic items. They are sorted in the ways I'm about to explain in the system that I have created for simply organizing the magic items, and they're sorted by type and weapon and armor and all that kind of stuff too. These are all super fun and unique to see myself and my team come together to make 100 super fun, interesting, unique magic items. And in the spirit of Alkander's Almanac, you can use code Alkander for 15% off on my website. Link will be down in the description until Alkander's Almanac itself releases and goes live to the public, and that's going to be a little bit over a month away. Wow, it's coming together so close. I'll have some more updates posted on that soon. But now let's get into what I do for this magic system and how I label magic items I think solves all of those issues I had. The best way to explain it is just to tell you, so here's how it works. Your low, super terrible magic items that are barely even a magic item. They're like a cantrip level power or worse, barely magic. It can have light on something. Oh, it does this little cool sound it makes. Something very, very simple. Those are wondrous magic items. They are literally, like I just said, the best way I can describe it is barely a magic item. And as soon as you approach first level spell-ish type of power, that's kind of where it ends. The farthest I would push it is maybe a one-time use per long rest of about a first level spell. That's about as powerful as you could get for wondrous, because you're starting to get a little bit more powerful than that, but there's a heavy limitations. And here's another thing I didn't even mention in the first part. I want to know and give dungeon masters, whenever I give you guys magic items in DC playbooks or whatever else, if you get a magic item from me, I want you to know how that would affect your game as a dungeon master. This is a huge point. I should have said before, but is this wondrous magic item? It won't affect your game at all. Don't be afraid to give out as many of these as you want. They literally can't break your game. They're just wondrous, crappy little magic items. Give them out, make them rain like candy, do whatever you want with them. Now, there might be a situation, in a super specific situation, that this wondrous item might shine really well. Ooh, cool. How awesome is that? These are just a bunch of fun toys for your characters to play with. Now we step up one notch to heroic magic items. Heroic magic items is the largest category of magic items, and it is pretty much all classic magic items. Now that might sound very broad, and that is purposely designed that way, because I'm going to go ahead and skip to the end here. The third and final highest tier is legendary. So the full spectrum is wondrous, heroic, legendary. That's it. So coming back to heroic magic items in a second, we already talked about wondrous. Let's talk about legendary. Those magic items are crazy strong, and we would all agree if we listed off a magic item, oh man, that legendary, it's super powerful. There's multiple things to it. You probably have a paragraph of text to read for what this thing does, how much it could affect your game. You would be like, ooh, if you're a dungeon master and you're about to give out this magic item, well, you better think twice. This, I feel like, is a much more valuable tool than labeling and different things. Like, okay, so very rare in the rules as written system. Those you got to be careful with, but then legendary is more. Whoa, but then what about artifact? And there's just those three I feel like you'd have to kind of worry about, but in lesser degrees. I'm saying legendary items, they're going to be very strong. Make them earn it. But when you do give that legendary magic item out, it's going to impact the game. Like always impact the game in probably lots of ways. Every combat is probably going to affect the game, etc. So that's how I've labeled legendary. Now for heroic magic items, they make up the huge, massive bulk of this thing, and most items would fit into this category, which I think is a good thing, not a lazy thing, or, oh, we need more categories. Why do you need more categories? Why? If I show you a magic item, I'm pretty sure we would all accurately be able to say if it's wondrous, heroic, or legendary. There's not going to be a lot of debate, and I think that's good. And it also keeps people from, whenever I give you a heroic item, you really got to know what it's about, because in some situations, a heroic heroic magic item will be super great and overpowered in very specific situations if you use it optimally or in the right situation. But in general, it's just going to be a strong magic item that the players will like and be able to use in a lot of situations. +1 magic items and armor, yeah, heroic, sure. +2, yeah, I'd probably say that's not too crazy. You don't have to like freak out before you give. Now, don't give it just hand out +2 magic items to people, but then +3, whoa, legendary. But overall for this system, I feel like it's good for homebrewers because you don't have to put too terribly much thought, and the label that you stamp on it is exactly what you would want as a dungeon master to know. Oh, I can hand this out, no problem. Oh, I better watch out to hand this out. Or it's just a magic item and you can give it out as a player rewards for whatever you're wanting to give it out for based on what they're doing. And none of those 3 words imply rarity at all, because it's up to you how rare these things are. Because there's another little extra bonus here that I just thought about. I do have an artifact label in my system that I use, but whenever I say artifact, it just means one of a kind. It doesn't mean like, oh, it's a beyond legendary. No, it's an artifact, it's a relic or whatever. It is a one of a kind thing. There's not multiple of these things. So something like a ring of protection, ring of invisibility, whatever, those things could probably be enchanted and stuff in cities, and it's just like a well-known type of thing you can do. Gauntlets of ogre strength, something like that. Unless in your world, gauntlets of ogre strength was a very specific thing and it has some sort of lore baked around to it, and there's only one set of gauntlets that slain the great ogres of whatever, and then sure, stamp it as an artifact. It's one of a kind. Because you could also have a wondrous item that's super terrible and crappy, and then you have a tag of artifact that you can put on that, and it's a one of a kind super crappy item. And on that note, though, I will say this as well. I have a whole nother system that I've started to come out in the DC playbooks and stuff, and some of the magic items of these super interesting magic items that are very dynamic. I call them dynamic magic items, and they are items that scale in power similar to the ones you've seen, the Vestige of Divergence from Critical Role, all that stuff. They level up with your character over time. But there's a lot of different ways for this. And usually, very fittingly so in the system that I already have, you can start off at Wondrous, then it upgrades to Heroic, then it upgrades to Legendary, and it fits very well in that too. But overall, the labeling of magic items I do not think should be too complicated. I think 3 tags on it is exactly what we need to solve the purpose of what it does. And if you're worried about, well, how much does it cost? What do all these different things do? How powerful? I think that's why I also like having heroic magic items be in a very large gray area, because it makes Dungeon Masters really have to think about how would this magic item affect my world. Because if I show one heroic item, if I put it on the screen right now of a heroic magic item, and I asked you guys to rate it for your current campaign that you're playing right now, you might see that item and be like, oh my gosh, if the barbarian gets their hands on that, that's crazy. Or, oh my gosh, if I give that item wouldn't have any hold in my campaign, that nobody would even use it. So you have to know as yourself as a dungeon master what item and how it would impact your own game. And you having that thought is not going to put some training wheels on you. Basically, it's going to make you have to think about it and put some thought into how powerful this magic item is for your own group. And if you're thinking about cost, I have a whole different system that's going to be for cost. That's actually going to be something I'll announce more stuff later here. But I have a whole thing I'm working on for an economy system, a crafting system, a cost system to be able to fix gold in Dungeons and Dragons. It's a whole big thing I want to do with that, and an entire system where you could, it's like a ledger. The thing I'm working on, it's a ledger, and you could tell me a magic item, I would be able to go through the ledger and tell you the exact cost of that item. Pretty sweet. So if this rant speaks to you and you like it, let me know what you think down below about magic systems. I mainly wanted to do this video because it always bothered me, this system. I've never ever talked about it. My patrons know about it because they get it in the magic items, and it is a very intuitive process that I've had no confusion ever in over a year now of doing monthly releases to my patrons with magic items. They've never been like, excuse me, they've never had any confusion. So I guess that's good too. And speaking of patrons, I want to thank all of you that support me over on Patreon to help make all of this possible. I wouldn't be able to make as much content as I do across the different channels and the different resources and tools and art and different people on the team that I can now have. There's no way any of that would be possible without you guys. And the MVP, most valuable patron of this video, is going to be Angus McAllister. So thank you, Angus. Thank you, patrons. And thank you for making it this far in the video. So keep thinking creative. Wait, no, keep staying creative and thinking outside the box. Peace.